Now you can pull the wheel off, or you can just turn the wheel to get it out of your way. I'm just going to use a 7mm socket. Take this bolt out here. There may be one right there, and take that one out as well. And then take a trim tool, and there's push pins. There's one right here. There should be two right there. Take those out. And there should be one right here as well. You can take that one out. Should be able to move this panel back. Just grab the bumper, slide it over here. You can pull this piece of the bumper out. You can access the negative battery terminal right here. Take a 10mm socket with an extension and disconnect the negative side. You don't want to disconnect the positive side. It's always better to disconnect the negative side so you don't arc anything out. Loosen this up. Couple turns. Should be able to grab the terminal and just wiggle it up and out of the way. I want to take this panel down. If you have this vehicle, you might have a panel that goes right here with other fasteners. This vehicle doesn't have it, but take that one down first. And I'm going to use a 7mm socket. Take all these screws out. And there's a push pin on both sides on the ends. Just take a straight blade screwdriver or a trim tool. Try to pry it out. If the push pin's not in too bad a shape, you can use a Phillips head screwdriver and loosen it up that way. Slide the center out and slide the other piece out. And there's a couple push pins right here. Take those out on both sides. Just use a trim tool. Slide the center part out. Slide that out. Underneath here, take these three 10mm bolts out. Just use a 10mm socket. Now I can grab this panel and just slide it out. Now on the passenger side of the radiator at the base, there is a drain. It's a pepcock. What I can use is some pliers or some needle nose just to try to loosen this up a little bit. Just be careful. And you want to make sure you do this when the engine is not hot. You don't want to do it when it's hot because it'll spray out. Just put a drain bucket underneath here. There we go. And it's starting to drain. I'll let that drain. From up top to make the coolant come out a little quicker, I'm going to take this coolant cap off. Just slide that off. I'm going to take the wheel off. I'm going to use a 19mm socket. Pull the wheel down. I'm going to take this push pin out right here. Just use a trim tool. Oops. Get underneath there. Slide that out. Now I'm going to use a 10mm socket. There's a bolt right here. Take this bolt off. Now I'll take this bolt out right here. And I can pull this whole shield down. Before I remove the serpentine belt, I'm actually going to take a 10mm wrench, just loosen up the bolts that hold the water pump pulley on. You can use the advantage of the belt holding the pulley for you. I'm going to use a serpentine belt tool with a 15mm socket adapter on there. Go right here on the tensioner, and I'm going to twist it like I'm pushing the tool towards the front of the vehicle. That's going to loosen up the belt and slide the belt off the crankshaft. And then loosen up the tensioner. I can take the tool off. Now I'll take the belt off the alternator, off the idler, pulley, and then way up top, off the power steering pump. And off the other idler pulley, and then off the water pump. It's always a good idea to just snap a picture of the location of where the belt goes and the different direction that it goes over the pulleys. Now I'm just going to take a ratchet wrench, 10mm ratchet wrench, take those bolts out of this pulley. Once you loosen them up, you should be able to get them by hand. Pull those out. As I take the last one out, the pulley is going to come off with it. Just slide the pulley off. We're going to take a 12mm socket and take these bolts out. There's 5 bolts, 2 on the bottom, 3 on the top. Loosen them up. You might want to put a drain bucket underneath the engine on this side, because once this water pump breaks free, you're going to lose some coolant. So might as well catch it. I'm just going to loosen these up a little bit by hand now. Now that I got all the bolts a couple turns loose, I'm just going to give it a tap with a hammer to break the seal. There we go. Let that drain out. All right, now the coolant's drained out. I'm just going to take those bolts out. Now I got the last bolt out. I can grab the water pump and just slide it forward. I'm going to have to rock it back and forth a little bit and slide it down and pull it up. Luckily, the water pump actually came off with the gasket, but if this didn't come off, then you're gonna have to take that off the engine. You don't want that. You don't want to double gasket it. And what you need to do, just take a rag and clean up the surface area. If you see anything from the gasket, take a razor blade or a scraper and scrape it off. You want it to be a nice clean surface. All right, take the new gasket. Should be able to line it up. There's a couple of alignment pins. You can slide that on those alignment pins and the gasket should stay. And take the water pump. Get the bolts started. Now I'm going to use a torque wrench and tighten these down to 18 foot-pounds. All right, now I'll take the pulley, line that up. Let's install the screws or bolts. Now I'll just take a 10mm ratchet wrench and tighten these up. Do the best you can while it's still loose, while you have the belt off. All right, we're going to take the serpentine belt, go all the way to the top to where the power steering pump is. Go over the power steering pump. All right, once we're at the point where we have the belt over the power steering pump, it's going to go in front of the top idler pulley, and the belt's going to go back this way. That's going to go back over the water pump. And the front side, it's going to come over to this idler pulley. It's going to go down, and then it's going to go up over the alternator. And this is going to go over the tensioner pulley right here, and then over the crank pulley. Now you may have to adjust this. You may have to go over the crank pulley first. Take it off this idler pulley right here. Get it over these pulleys and try to get it back on that idler pulley. All right, with that almost there, just use the belt tool, loosen this up a little bit. Oh, I see where it is. Falling off the water pump a little bit. Got to be on all the pulleys correctly. So make sure that's on right. That looks good. And then it slips right on. I can take the tensioner tool off. Just double check all your pulleys. It looks good. All right, take this panel, just slide that in position. get the bolt started. And right here. I'll tighten these bolts down. Install these push pins. And if you didn't take that cover off, install the push pins right here if you had to pull that off. Put the wheel back on and install the lug nuts. Now I'm going to use a torque wrench and torque these lug nuts to 100 foot-pounds in a star pattern to tighten the wheel down evenly. And just go around again, double check. Now reinstall the lower shield. Just slide this in position and install the screws. And tighten these up. And install these push pins on the corners. And put the push pins in right here on both sides. Lock them down. And then install these 3 bolts. Tighten them down. And then if you have another shield that goes right here, install that. Now we can reconnect the negative side of the battery. Just take the terminal, put it on the battery. Just take a 10mm socket and an extension. Get it on the battery terminal and tighten it up. And just grab the battery cable, make sure it's tight. That's good. Now it'll be a little bit easier to get this on if you put the inner shield in first. Line that up. And line the bumper back up. Alright, reinstall this screw and the one down there. Tighten it up. Install this push pin right here. Right there. If you have one right there, install that. And then these 2 as well. Remove the radiator cap if you didn't have it off already. I'm going to use a funnel. I'm going to use this adapter first. You don't necessarily have to do this, but it makes it a lot easier. Check your owner's manual so you can add the appropriate coolant. Most of the air has burped out. What you can do is squeeze some of the pipes, the upper radiator hoses, see if any more air comes out. And at this point, we're going to leave the level right there and we're going to start the vehicle. I want to turn the heat all the way to full blast. I can have it coming out the vents, and turn the blower on medium. And I want to constantly check and make sure I get heat coming out of the vents. I want to monitor the temperature gauge, make sure it doesn't go above into the hot range, so constantly checking on that. And then I'm going to constantly check the level out here, making sure the level of coolant does not get too low. So it's been running about 10 minutes. My upper radiator hose is really hot, so that's good. The thermostats have opened. So my temp gauge is right where it's supposed to be, which is good. Right. So if you didn't have a lot of heat coming out of the vents, but the temperature was still okay, probably still have a little bit of an air pocket, what you can do is throttle the accelerator up to about 2,000 RPM, hold it there for a little bit. You want to constantly check the level outside. Maybe you can have a friend looking at that while you're doing this. Hold it there for a little bit, and then you should be getting heat again out of the vents. When that's all set, at this point, we can shut the vehicle down and let it cool down. All right, at this point, I'm just going to take the funnel off. There's a little stopper in for that funnel. Take the adapter off. Make sure the coolant is up to that level. You can put the cap on. And then check over on the reservoir. You're going to want to add coolant to the reservoir. It shows a line where it's hot, and then there's a line where it's cold. Adjust accordingly, and you should be good to go.